This is Chris Egger back with another episode of Cannabis Capitol's Pop Politics, and I'm here today with the one and only Ishqa, founder of CannabosBabes, a grassroots activist and a cannabis voter, here to talk politics and stuff. Ishqa, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris.
It's good to have you.
It's exciting to be here.
So first and foremost, everybody, if you're not aware, I'm going to ask Ishqa to give us some background on CannabosBabes and the mission, because some of the topics we're going to be talking about today will dive into gender equity as well as social equity, activism and organization in the cannabis movement, and political spectrum issues. But, can you do us a favor and just give us a little bit of a download on CannabosBabes? Such a great organization.
Thank you. So I always start by saying, first and foremost, we are an entrepreneurial support platform. And that's because how I started was business consulting. That's my background. That's what I do, help businesses grow. And what I found was, even though I had started a whole other business to do that, my first few clients were women in the space who felt unheard, unsupported. You guys have your boys club and really just weren't sure how to connect and how to tap in when they felt like it was shut doors everywhere. Right. So, but also at the same time, I met a lot of really wonderful men such as yourself who really do support women in cannabis, who do support equity and are just good people. So the CannabosBabes, everyone's a babe.
This is a matriarchal industry, right? Everyone's pursuing the female version of the plant. Amen.
I mean, amen. And I think, there's definitely a lot of, I would say, feminine properties to it. The community over competition. I feel that,
That's right.
A lot of us.
And there's a lot to learn in that regard. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So in that regards, then you started growing, right? Like in terms of the CannabosBabes as a organization, so to speak, or a network maybe, right?
Well, as a network, and really before the pandemic, we were doing events. So, the best way to promote all these different businesses and bring people together to meet and then work and network is through event space. So we did quite a few of those. Mm-hmm. And then when the pandemic hit, I just couldn't let the connections stop.
Right.
And so that's when we went to Instagram, and up until 2 Sundays ago, Instagram pulled our page.
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
We'll get into that later.
Okay.
But 85 weeks. We did 85 weeks, and we did 800 shows.
Wow. That's amazing. And by doing that, what you're talking about, too, is you had guests of all stripes, right?
All over the world that were different cannabis activists, or not even just cannabis. I mean, I had one guest, Mavi, who is a woman down in the Dominican Republic who is trying to create opportunities for Haitians who are there,
right.
Without any rights. So there's, a lot of different
political issues come up.
Absolutely.
But when we talk about that, right, like that's one of the reasons I wanted to have Ishqa on the program today, because, over the past, this is our season 2, this will be our 4th episode, believe it or not. Nowhere near the 800 that you've gone through with the CannabosBabes, but meaningfully, one of the things we've been talking about is, okay, so the cannabis consumer is also a cannabis voter. Okay, and there's a lot of organizational leadership out there. Some of the people we've talked about, in our prep for this, Candace Hawes from OC Normal. She was one of the original people I had on here who drove the legislation in Santa Ana in 2014 through the municipal ballot initiative programs and her Measure CC and Measure BB. Yeah. And during that era, we've had other guests like the proponents for Measure M, the guys who led, the California Minority Alliance, who led the Los Angeles version of that. But really, to be honest with you, the backbones of all of those groups are really people such as yourself, right? And so as a CannabosBabe, and as the CannabosBabe, by the way, tell us a little bit, right, like about the issues that you've been active in, because you and I have talked a lot about social equity. We've talked about the expungements and different things. So I think it's a great place to start. The political landscape changed with the passage of AUMA. What do we need to know about what's going right in that area and what's going wrong, or what's available?
I mean, there's so much work to be done. As soon as you mentioned Candace. Candace was actually one of the speakers the first night we have an endocannabinoid system. So I had no idea. She was there. They were speaking. I found out and was just mind blown.
Right.
And the initial thought, and this is what I always tell everybody about my origin story, so to speak, right, is my initial thought was all the people locked in cages in prisons and people like me locked in a gilded golden cage because I'd been somewhat comfortable, found my success in corporate, even though I was looking to leave it to do consulting and work in juvenile halls. And so when I first found that out, and then I started learning more about the history and really diving into the education and the history of cannabis in this country and its discriminatory practices and all of it, that was already the work that I was looking to do. And so it just kind of
continued to blossom and transition.
It really did. And as a business consultant, meeting all these people who, oh, well, here's what you do. Oh, well, you just need to do this. And everywhere you go, because of legislation, no, you can't do that. There's laws against that. No, we can't market. No, we can't get business financing. No, we can't get, like anything.
Absolutely.
Like there's, it's so prohibitive. I like a good challenge. What can I say?
Well, and interestingly enough, on the front end, and I appreciate that, right, about you. You have a tenacious spirit. And by the way, also a champion for, I think, what's right and just, right, for folks. Because that's the thing. You've worked on social equity type workshop programs, right? Have those been successful? Have you seen a rollout? Are people getting assistance and helping? Because part of the legal struggle, so the political stuff that we talk about, one is consumer related, right? The high taxes, they affect consumers, quality access, right? Local access in their communities to regulated products at the highest quality. And then we have the industry, right? Which is where that regulation structure really needed to kind of come in, and we can talk about banking, we can talk about some of that stuff when we're consulting. But at the end of the day, the social equity component is something I think that people have really brought to the forefront. And I know it's going to be a big topic federally.
Yeah.
So what has your grassroots and ground experience been here? Have you worked with organizations? I know you guys do some workshops and clinics for people.
Yes. So I've been working with the LBCA for the last 2 years. I mean, they're the organization that I first discovered all this through.
And
one
of the best practice organizations out there with the longest history in the space for sure on the political level. Absolutely.
And really with the goals to educate the community, and I think that's where it begins. That's where my own passion was lit.
Right.
And so I have been a part of their social equity subcommittee for the past year.
Okay, cool.
We did a lot of work. That was really interesting. So it's really, first let me just say I've lived in Long Beach for 18 years. The last 2 are the first that I feel that I've really lived in Long Beach. I had social anxiety before and I went to work and right, but being able to get involved through cannabis and really understanding what the issues are and how important it is that I represent, and I find it's not just me, it is a community, represent the voice of the community, of the people, understand what the issues are. And I've always been so curious and wanting to know everything anyway, that's the interviewer in me. But being able to go and take those issues and communicate them to the government, which I feel the last 20 years of my corporate life and training, right, kind of prepared me for. Right. And so it's provided me an opportunity to go in and really learn from sitting in our city council meetings. And that's where it all starts, is local. Everybody I recommend. Even right now, the city council meetings are still on Zoom, most of them. You can listen in. It's just really interesting.
That's a very interesting roadblock to some of the progress that was being made, right? Because when you show up and you actually breathe the same air and you're in the same room and you can share your comments in that environment, right? So that's activism. And that, we've been talking about this a lot on the program, right? Because there's the issue of taxation, right? Which I believe fully is handicapping the regulated market compared to the illicit market. Not because taxes aren't relevant and they shouldn't be paid, right? Even in the Prop 215 compliant era, people were expected to pay their California sales tax, even with federal, regulation in terms of how they were staying away from it. And then there's local access, right? Yeah. And one of the reasons that Candace and some of the first wave in 2014 of ballot initiatives that were in the local communities made is because the California Supreme Court, when there was a case in the city of Riverside, right, against a dispensary operator, they said you can regulate time, place, and manner. Even though it's legal to have, a dispensary operation, the city was allowed to ban, right? And the judge even said in that, he said, but the California voter has a way of changing that situation by passing a ballot initiative, a citizen initiative, right? And that really started, and that was 2012, I believe, right? So, and then Long Beach, you weren't there for it, but I know that we had Stephen Neal on last week, and he talked about it. He was a council member at the time in the city of Long Beach, but the Long Beach Collective Association actually did exactly that. They went and pushed cannabis regulatory language through and worked with the city finally to get it to where it is today, where we actually have like a thriving, robust system. So that's a good question for you, right? Do you see like a pulse in the cannabis culture that you're grassrootsing with, so to speak, that looks towards the future of this industry, maybe needing some fires lit?
Absolutely.
On that level, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. The more that you get involved, the more you realize that politics is always about playing a game. And so you want to try and get in as much as you can, but you also know that there's always going to be a cost for everything that you ask for. And so, it's really like, and a lot of the legislation that's been created around cannabis, there's big costs to all of it. Like we passed 64, and there's a lot of people who argue that it shouldn't have passed the way it was because of how prohibitive it was written. I mean, we couldn't even we didn't have compassion care for 2 years, right? Like that took away the heart of why this plant was so important to these people anyway.
Right.
And so, but at the same time, when you are at those tables and you're dealing with the politicians and you know that there's a cost for everything you ask for,
right,
you recognize that, okay, we need to just get this in now and then we have to change it. But I think that a lot of people have an idea that all they need to do is vote, and then it's up to whoever's behind the curtain to take it from there. And really what our responsibility is it's our responsibility to hold the people that we vote for and hold the things that we vote for accountable.
right.
And that requires consistent showing up. And that's.
So that's why I keep telling people there's no
our
more
duty.
squeaky wheel. Where's the common ground anymore amongst, the cannabis culture was really united towards 2016, right? And it was a moment in time. And I think, everyone kind of be careful what you ask for, right? Because we found out what the price was, and it's been hard because you work with so many entrepreneurs, right, in the space who are really trying to develop businesses and stuff. And, that's one of the things, right, with the social equity programs, right, that you're finding. What kind of change do you think is going to happen in that space? Do you think there's going to be funding from the state? Do you think that'll fix stuff? Do you think it's like giving better business structure support? And I know that banking is something we can talk about in that conversation because the SBA, Small Business Administration loans and things that aren't available.
I mean, there's a lot of challenges because of the federal status of the plant still.
Right.
So banking definitely is needed. I think, with the heavy taxation, one of the other things too that we're dealing with the traditional market is that, yes, they run the risk of getting caught. The penalty is they
So you
still
call it
end
the
up having to
traditional
pay.
market, not the illicit market. That's interesting.
I can call it the illicit market too, but
I think culturally,
but
though, I think culturally, I get it because
traditional
people who
market's
care
what I
about
do.
cannabis, right? They a lot of them were Prop 215
I
compliant.
don't want to call
They
them
were
illicit. There's nothing illicit about them. Most of the
Good.
people that are in the traditional market are in it because they were in it before, what they make works, and they just want to help people.
Right, and that's the truth, right?
So,
I would say there's a vast majority of that, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No,
I wanted to say because it's true. We are a culture, right?
Yeah.
And the cannabis culture is what brought forth Prop in 1996, the Compassionate Use Act, right? And in Prop 215 compliance, there was a lot of taxes being paid, right, in the state of California, but that transition happened with AUMA, and it's become to the point now where it's more about the taxing, so to speak, than it is about helping the industry actually survive the transition from the quasi-legal environment of the Prop 215 compliant era to this regulated structure. And California should be a leader in this, but it seems like it's getting more and more complicated.
It's getting more and more complicated. I think some of it is when you look at, so going back to what I was saying of like the traditional brands, if they get caught, yes, they have to pay their fines, but honestly, there's not any repercussions other than you have to pay your taxes that are due. Like really, that's all that anyone cares about. Pay your taxes. Now, what these brands are finding is that the cost of those fines as they're getting popped, right, is essentially the same as what the entry fee is if you were to join the legal market. However, there's a risk that you can still survive the traditional market because there's really not a lot of people doing too much about it. And you still get to keep all your money up front, which you can use to invest in other things to make sure that if you do end up having to pay later, you at least have it. The legal market, the licensed market is paying so much up front in all these taxes, has no access to be able to build up a cash flow to be able to invest and have other diversify or anything with their businesses. And so it's so burdensome from the beginning. Like the people that are in this industry, the people that are really, like the LBCA members that have been doing this for a really long time and haven't just got their business up and running and sold it, right? Yeah. They do it because they love it.
Legacy operators.
That's it.
Who want it, and by the way,
you have
compliance
to love
is
it
expensive.
To still do it.
Just to even get to the point of having met the level of compliance expectations, then there's all the stuff you talked about, your career path in the corporate world, right? But you understand human resources, all of the various insurances, and right, and indemnifications, and you have all these things that the cannabis industry craved that legitimacy, and I think ultimately federal legalization is on the horizon too, right? In next year, they believe, right, that as Booker
didn't we say that last year? I feel like it kind of keeps kicking down the road, so I'm not putting my faith in a lot right now.
Right. So what do you think the most important thing is that a cannabis voter in California, at least, do you think it's the local municipal level where most change can happen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it is, and I think that's where we need to organize.
And focus. So,
like the LBCA has been able to form together the different business operators and volunteers and advocates such as myself. Right. I don't have a cannabis license. I'm adjacent, and so.
Yeah, but you are a cannabis consumer. You're a cannabis voter. You're a cannabis, like you said, activist, and someone who has a real, stake in the game, so to speak, on a personal level, right? And that is important for us to recognize.
But you don't have to be all those things to get involved.
That's true, but you do to be on politics.
Yeah.
Right? And that's my point, right? So you go to these events, you're organizing, you guys do beach cleanups, right? And things like that. How many people do you see coming into that? Because the reason I mention this is grassroots activism and this culture is steadfast, right? It's a big part of what we do and who we are.
Yeah. Well, there is this woman behind the LBCA, Pam Chodaswati, and her background is public health.
Yeah.
And she's all about education. And, I think that she has really taken what she's great at, which is working within the community. The LBCA has a very active partnership with AOC7, which is a neighborhood association, which when you think about cannabis and neighborhood associations, you don't really think that they go together. But these organizations really find ways to be able to show the community and the city of Long Beach that cannabis is here, is nothing to be afraid of. And I think that it's, through the different backpack drives, through the different toy drives, through the different, Thanksgiving turkey drives, and every other Wednesday passing out food. And so just really making sure that people are taken care of in our community while we wear our cannabis masks or our cannabis clothes. I've got my belt on now,
Right. We were talking about that as you came in, fashion statement.
Yeah, and so, it's really showing people that there's nothing to be afraid of, like, hey, I have this, and also giving them an opportunity to ask someone questions in what is a friendly opportunity. And so, that's the kind of grassroots movement that's important.
Amen. The LBCA model has really created, for me, it's fascinating, but it's an exemplary structure, right, for how to galvanize truly the voice of a definitive, silo, right? I mean, there's so many problems in the world, transportation and infrastructure. You keep hearing about the infrastructure bill at the federal level, and all the needs that society has go beyond education, different things. But cannabis is a very specific, it was a squeaky wheel, I think, in 2016. And then we kind of got quiet. Like, they put some oil on the squeaky wheel by giving us legalization. But the people who have been imposing regulation onto the consumer and onto the industry who's trying to create this compliant best practice model, they've layered it with so much complexity and so many heavy weights and so many impediments to success that people are failing, not because they want to be illicit or in the traditional market, because they want to be, but they can't do it. They just can't transition, and they need to survive and they need to live. And that's one of the things. So
how is social equity supposed to survive, right?
That's exactly what I was trying to get to, right? So you've done these relationships with different people. Have you seen it? Is there any success stories out there that you know of? From the cannabis community, people who have made the transition. Maybe they didn't have any special program or anything, but anyone you would consider, the personification of social equity and practice.
I mean, I think that there are brands, and I think that there are programs. Even I know that there's Our Academy. Hillary Yu and Tamika Drew put that together, and up in the Bay Area, and different social equity brands have gone through their program. SF Roots, Bika Flowers, Tamika's brand. They're an amazing women-owned.
Right. So last night at the Long Beach Collective Association meeting, she was represented there. But I mean, so those stories exist, right?
Yeah, they do.
Okay,
exist.
good. And because that's positive, because that's the thing that the cannabis culture has always taken care of itself. Yeah. I always tell people for many years.
It's not easy.
Right.
We have to support these brands. Like it's our job as consumers to know where our money's going and know what it's going to support. And, I mean, there can be really awesome product, and sure, go get that. If you want to go get that bomb stizzy, like, you can do that. I don't, but you can do that. I really look to quality of product and also quality of company. I coming from corporate and having things like leadership and culture be important to me always. Like I was the girl at the last job that was like, do we have the socially responsible 401k plans yet? Can I, so that's always kind of been a little of who I am as well. But I also think it's really important that we live very intentional lives, and that we don't just do things because other people are doing things and it looks like the right thing to do, but that we have an awareness.
And there's a lot of events that happen in the cannabis industry, right? But that, the grassroots organizational side of that, I think, as we move into 2022 and we start trying to organizationally get our arms around some of these issues, right? I know that in Long Beach at some point they'll have a social equity program that they plan. Maybe it's being kicked down the road to next year.
Oh no, there's an active social equity program in Long Beach. The reason why we actually met as a subcommittee with LBCA was because it was failing.
Yeah.
So we had to.
Okay, so
we made a recommendation. Right? Yeah. So what happened was 1 out of 78 applicants made it through the program. Wow. So at the end of last year, because like a year ago now, it really was like a year ago now. Yeah, right. When we had our initial meeting,
right? With all the noise disruptions.
When we had that initial meeting, the people at the city, part of what blew my mind, and it was my first time really having that level of depth of a meeting with the city people, was they really genuinely thought that only that one person wanted it bad enough, and that was the problem. So there's just a big disconnect, and I think that's again where people like me who have like the corporate mindset, so I can speak your language and get you to understand what I'm talking about. I know you need bottom line, and I get I know all the things you need, and you got to make them happy and like all HR. Like I know about having to make everybody happy, but at the same time needing to understand very real conditions that your constituents are dealing with
and struggling with, right?
Right.
I firmly believe this. I think that the tax collections will go up. I know that there's different voices in this space.
Already at the state, they're talking that's gone up.
Well, I know.
January 1st.
But what I mean is if they lowered the taxes, but opened up the unavailable market space right now in all these communities. Like 70% to 80% of the communities in California don't have licensed retail operations in their community. And
Orange County, hello.
For real, right? And Huntington Beach is a city that I was blown away. That Costa Mesa's catching up, and they'll be coming online. Corona's another city out in the Inland Empire. So there's some big ones coming.
Fullerton figure out what they're doing yet?
I haven't. And my point is this, right? Which is that the taxation, I guess, is the compelling issue for some people. But I think that is the yesterday argument. The war on drugs ended, right? And we can't be trying to submit people to unconditional surrender in the sense that we need to find that common ground. Now, cannabis has proven to be a community asset, and almost everywhere it functions in a regulated, space. And the culture and the people who are in the cannabis communities do so as well. But it's time to reorganize and re-energize that energy, in my eyes.
I think Long Beach has led the way in that too. We at the end of 2019 were able to miraculously lower the cannabis tax.
On the municipal level in the city?
Yes, we were. However, 6 months later, once COVID kicked in last summer, there was talk about raising it a cent for the consumer. The LBCA was, being the voice that they are in the city, were able to go in and talk to council and convince them, look, don't just, you guys just lowered it, don't do it back up. What's that do? And instead of that, if what you're looking for is money, because everyone was looking for money in COVID, right? How about we open up the hours of the shops and extend the hours of the shops? And so what they did was, instead of it being from 9 to 9, they opened it 8 to 10. It came back, I think it was 3 times more money than what it would have been if they had just raised the tax.
Right.
So I think
There's
you're right.
so many ways to approach it.
But that's where we need these other cities to come together, and the operators within the cities to come together, work together, and then we really need to start talking to each other as cities and as voices. There's a lot of really great, strong organizations within the state, but there's still not a lot of cross collaboration, and it's time. We need to take it to the state. It's getting time.
We did a panel here on politics where Adam Hijazi so he's one of the co-founders and a board member there, and Virgil Grant, who's he's a cannabis entrepreneur, but also was the California Minority Alliance, one of the co-founders of that, and worked on Measure M in Los Angeles, and Sean Kiernan from Weed for Warriors, and Sean was the original guest for Pop Politics. And the auspice of the show came about, the California Cannabis Reform Initiative. It was an idea floated by the Weed for Warriors at the time, right, to create some sort of framework that addressed the ideas of taxation, local market access, for potentially qualifying into the state ballot, right? But, cannabis voters need to start galvanizing again around these issues. The hope is, before the end of this year, is that we're going to be bringing, the folks down from Humboldt County and the Bay Area to have a discussion like we're having, a moderated discussion about issues that collectively face us. Because for me, I'm a common ground guy. I know that in some people, they like wedge issues, they like divisiveness, they like to say, hey, it's you choose red shirts or blue shirts, but you're one or the other, and I'm not that. And I don't believe cannabis voters are either. I think this is more akin to property taxes.
I don't think that's how anyone in this day and age should be voting anyway. I think that any time that there's an issue where it's you choose that side or this side, it's a tactic. It's a diversion tactic from what's really important and from the solution.
Right. Thank you, because that was really a bold and true statement, right, from your heart, I could tell. And I agree with it wholeheartedly, is that people, issues are important. And issues are complex, and there will be exceptions to every rule, right? And you have an activist mindset, and we haven't even gotten into the medicinal level dialogue right now on the political level, because for me, it's beyond me that you can still consider cannabis an excise tax in the medicinal mindset. I know that the state and the AUMA remove sales tax for a registered patient, but they still pay an excise tax, which to me is just, it's just very bizarre, because you don't have that in other areas.
And they also give up other rights.
And it's alternative medicine is what they're starting to call it. It's starting to ease its way into it. But the only way to make change happen is kind of what you're describing, is the organizational side, right? And that's why I was so impressed with you. I wanted to have you on here, right? And talk about that, because you attend the meetings, right? And you participate in it. And there's a lot of fun that comes from that too, right? I mean, you do go to events that are, they're grassroots and they're organized around these issues, right? But they're a little fun too, am I right?
They're a lot of fun too. I love it. I learned so much, and I get to meet amazing people. Like I become amazing good friends with Felicia Carbajal of the Social Impact Center. She's one of the main people behind the 60,000 cannabis records that were just expunged by
really?
LA. Yes.
So that's actually a success. And I always
Yes.
try to ask people what's going
Yes,
right,
it
because
is.
we always sit and
That's
talk
what's
about
going
what's
right.
going wrong.
Felicia's
you know
going
what I-
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Tell me a little bit more about this. How did you
Yeah.
get involved? Were you there in some of the workshops, or did
Oh,
you help
yeah,
direct
no,
people
I've
there?
done, I mean, I've been working with her since last year, so this was actually my second National Expungement Week, the official week of action. Although the work is done year round now. So, 4 years ago, it was just a week, and really trying to raise awareness around that this is something that can be done, for people. There's a lot of people who have records that have just had them so long, they don't even know that, hey, you can get that stuff cleared off now and maybe go and apply for those jobs that you were too afraid of.
Or that you at one point were denied.
Right. And it's life-changing work. So, again, because I had wanted to go work in the juvenile hall since I had been in one when I was younger. So, that's work that's important to
It's
me.
funny, but people lose their right to vote sometimes with some
They
of these
do.
convictions, right? And
They
they
absolutely
regain
do.
it with the expungement. Is
Yeah,
that
they
right?
do.
Correct? So then they become a potential voter in that space,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, they do.
If you, all right, so if I was sitting here and I was saying, Ishqa, I'm trying to get people going, what do you think the model is? Do you think finding people in cities, or do you think it's the industry needs to raise its voice in the communities where we've established ourselves to better show the example to other cities, or do you think we need to send out ambassadors to all these communities where there is no legislation and try to help them find a way to achieve it?
It's both. I mean, my leadership style is always like try to lead by example and rally and see what, resonates with people. And it's a bit of both, because the cities that don't have that organization within them lack organization.
Right.
Most government lacks
and then potentially lack of
organization.
voice, and then potentially lack of voice.
Right.
Right.
And so if you can't figure out how to get it together, not like get it together, but like how to really organize in an effective manner within your community in a way that your community will respond positively to. Because, you also can't just go into a community and be like, you have to do this. Like, you got to do a little research and
Absolutely.
know your audience a bit.
And get programmatic. I think that's the
Yeah.
key to
Yeah.
really solid activism in a community. Something that I know that the LBCA has done a really great job of,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And galvanizing,
I
the
mean,
structure.
the community giveaways, showing up at the different parades and things before COVID, being able to create an 8-week course for cannabis education to teach about the industry is like life-changing. Everyone should take it. They're coming up with a whole new 102 now. I'm very
Really?
proud. Yeah.
Very cool. Then that's at Long
Yeah.
Beach City College.
Long
So
Beach
is it a
City College.
certificate or is it a pass out? What kind of class is it?
It's an adult class. It's not certificated yet. Long Beach City College took a risk, and the
they did.
LBCA really worked hard to build up the relationship and the trust that this is a course that deserves to be here and something that will serve the community. And so, what's kind of funny, a funny story about it is when they first rolled out the class, the city said, okay, you can do one class once for 30 people and we'll see how it goes. 800 people signed up over the weekend.
That's wild. Right? Everyone talks about cannabis.
Yeah.
It's a job generator. It's an economic generator. It is a cultural reality too.
And everyone that goes through that class is mind blown because they had no idea it went that deep.
Who's teaching the class?
Oh, well, a lot of the LBCA operators are teaching the class, actually.
Right.
Pam is definitely, she gets in there and makes sure everyone knows their history,
Right.
which is exciting.
Cool.
We've got Adam Hijazi, who's also...
dispensary owner, right?
Yes,
Okay.
he owns the green room. Yep, and is the president of the LBCA. So even just being able to talk about the organizational work that they've done there. They have Hab Haddad, who is a distribution owner. He owns Greenpoint Holdings. And then he and his wife, Lisa, also have a brand, High and Mighty, which is an amazing women-owned brand. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different people. I believe it's Nate from Bill Costa covering the different lab stuff.
Oh,
I know
interesting.
that Natasha from Hey Bud, another amazing woman-owned brand, is in there for, teaching about cultivation. They really
So they
grab a
really
lot of
touch on
different
every level of the
everything.
industry. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they talk about social equity. They let people really know about that too. So it's, it's important. It's something that I really wish that, everyone keeps saying all the social equity applicants should take it. So social equity is really sad. What happens is these people, even if they get approved and there's money there, it's not enough money to really get going. It's like a quarter of
That
what
gets
you
me
need.
to the SBA loans and the things that banking reform are going to change. So, the truth be told, the galvanizing of the cannabis culture to get to the place where these things will actually happen, the real requirement of it is people like Ishqa. And people like Ishqa who actually show up at events, who actually, bring voices to the table, share an audience, right? CannaBossBabes, I want to get into this. They were nominated as one of the best podcasts for some sort of awards.
Orange County Cannabis Awards.
All right,
yeah.
so the Orange County Cannabis Awards, and I will vote for the CannaBossBabes because Ishqa has done a great job in that regards. But your Instagram went down, right? That's a tool that you use to actually reach people. How many followers did you have on that?
We had almost 7,300 followers
Right.
that we had grown organically in the last year and a
So
half.
I would say more than 7,000. I mean, so that's another thing that politically, the stigmas associated with cannabis culture have removed a viable tool for commerce and for regulated business to utilize. I mean, we're just subjugated to all these indignities, right? Humans just being, you know what I mean? You can have a nightclub event where alcohol is being sold, right? And they don't tell you that you can't invite people down to your bar or restaurant, right? And that's the adult use dialogue, right? And then on the medicinal level, right? Patients and people who are accessing cannabis and making use of it, right? In that regard.
I mean, on the
finding
adult use
information.
side, you can sit there and advertise alcohol all you want, and then they also sit there in the same breath and say, but don't get a DUI.
Yeah, and here we are
You
in
know.
this right now. This is what Cannabis Capitol was meant to be, right? Which was a First Amendment kind of environment where we could talk about ideas, put things out there, push towards a better tomorrow. I'm going to finish on this, right? And I'm going to say one thing after it, and I say it to all my guests. But I believe that like the Prop 13 Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association mindset, Republican, Democrat, small house, big house, doesn't matter. No one wants their property taxes to go up on a continuously, because what happens is as you retire and you're on a fixed income, if you continue to raise someone's property taxes arbitrarily or based upon your own desire to just receive more revenue, that person can be forced from their home, which is why Prop 13, I believe.
Watch those school measures, people. That's where they hide them.
And I believe this, right? I think that the like something in this vernacular, the Jack Herrera Taxpayers Association, where the cannabis consumer and the cannabis industry professional can all agree that we need to be participating in our business communities, much like all other businesses, right? We can pay a semblance of a tax, but it should be more for adult use on parity with alcohol taxes in that concept. And more importantly, for medicinal, really should be liberated from an excise tax mindset. And there's plenty of tax out there in just terms of sales tax, right? And an economic stimulus from the employment, right? And getting people in there, because to layer upon layer of taxes. So I just want you to know that there's a chance that as we move into next year that we're going to continue to try to galvanize this. And I think your voice is really relevant from the perspective of the consumer and the grassroots activists, right? Because we have a lot of organizational professionals who are working with the legislature, but you are actually frontline on this. Now, with that being said, is there anything we didn't cover in our conversation, my questioning didn't lead us to, or your contribution? Is there anything you'd like to say to the Cannabis Capitol audience?
I mean, keep supporting your cannabis content creators. There's a lot of people that work really hard. Make sure you're supporting different brands that you're researching who they are, what they support as well. Like, there's a lot of really great people making a lot of great products and to help people. So I think, just being aware, being a conscious cannabis consumer is all I ever really ask of anybody.
Amen.
We're not just here to party.
So Cannabossbabes is nominated for Best Podcast, right?
Best podcast,
at the Orange
yes.
County
You
Cannabis
can vote
Awards.
daily.
I have a podcast, but I'm going to vote for her podcast because I'll tell you what, that seriously, she has paid dues. And I want to thank you so much for coming in here today. Hopefully, by next week, we are working on getting a representative from the Emerald Triangle Cannabis community, right? To start talking about issues related to that. But we have other guests on horizon. And in December, I'm going to invite you back, Ishqa, because I think you'd be great to be in the audience for. We're trying to do a statewide panel. So here at Cannabis Capitol, bringing together the desert, the high desert, San Diego, Orange County, Los Angeles.
I'll be on my best behavior too.
You don't, right? You don't have to make promises that you may or may not want, right? But and then the Bay Area and the Emerald Triangle. I think until we're having these conversations, because we want to be part of what's right that's going on in the economy, in the community, in our homes. We want all that. We want lab testing. We want good, consistent best practices. We want labor-friendly, environments. We want, successful entrepreneurs. We want all these things. But I think the time has come to re-identify the common ground.
Yeah.
Right? And that's going to be my focus. And having you here today gives me confidence that there's a lot of people out there to fight for that I believe the same thing. So thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we'll be back with Cannabis Capitol's Pop Politics on Thursday at 2 p.m. Until then, thank you so much.